A boot kicked a basket sideways into the dirt. Eggs cracked against her shoes. Yellow yolk spread across her hem. A man laughed somewhere behind her. Then another. She did not move. She did not look up. She had heard the laughs before. She had heard them at church. She had heard them at the well. She had heard them at her own father's table. A voice in the crowd said the word that always came next. Fat, big, useless. Too much woman and not enough man would ever want her. Her name was Hannah Mae Carter. She was 28 years old. She had stopped arguing back when she was just 16. It was easier. But what happened in the next 10 minutes made every laughing mouth go shut. What did the richest rancher in the territory say when he walked into that street? Stay with me on this one. Let me back up. Let me tell you who Hannah Mae Carter was, and how she came to be standing in the middle of that dirt street on a Tuesday morning with broken eggs at her feet. Hannah was the second daughter of Elias Carter. Her mother died when she was 9. Her older sister Ruth was the pretty one, the small one, the one people called delicate. Ruth married a clerk from St. Joseph when she was 19 and moved east. Nobody in town wrote her letters anymore. They had moved on to the next thing. Hannah stayed. Hannah always stayed. Her father broke his leg in a fall from the loft when Hannah was 15. The bone never set right. He could walk but slow. He could lift but not heavy. So the farm became Hannah's. She was big-boned from her mother's side, broad in the shoulder, strong in the arm. She could carry a sack of feed her father couldn't even tip. She could pull a calf out of a cow when the calf came backward. She could chop wood for an hour without sitting down. The town knew this. The town had seen it. The town watched her bring eggs and butter to market every Tuesday for 13 years, and the town bought from her, and the town went home and ate her bread, and the town still called her what they called her. Fat, Big Hannah, the Carter ox. There was a particular boy who had started it. His name was Wesley Pike. His father owned the bank. Wesley was the same age as Hannah, but where she had grown thick and tall, he had grown lean and handsome and quick with a smile. The kind of smile that made women on the boardwalk straighten their bonnets when he passed. When Hannah was 12, Wesley followed her home from school and called her a heifer in front of 3 other boys. She had hit him hard. He had cried. He had told his father she had attacked him without provocation. Hannah's father had been called to the bank. Hannah's father had apologized. From that day on, Wesley Pike had made it his small daily business to ensure the town never forgot what Hannah Mae Carter was. She had stopped arguing back when she was 16, like I told you. It happened after her father's wedding day speech for Ruth. He had stood up and said his Ruth was a blessing and a wonder and a gift to her new husband. He had not mentioned Hannah at all. Hannah, who had cooked the meal. Hannah, who had sewn Ruth's dress. Hannah, who had run the farm for the year leading up to that day so Ruth could keep her hands soft for her wedding. Hannah had gone outside. She had sat on the porch. She had decided that arguing was for people who thought they could win. Now I want to tell you about a man. His name was Silas Holloway. He owned the Diamond H. The Diamond H sat 30 miles west of town and stretched across more land than 3 counties combined. Holloway ran 4,000 head of cattle. He paid 16 men year-round and twice that at branding. He had built every fence on that ranch with his own hands when he started out at 22. He was 36 years old. He was a widower. His wife had died of a fever 6 years back. He had not remarried. He had not, by all anyone could tell, even looked. He came into town once a month for supplies. He paid in gold. He spoke to the storekeeper and to no one else. Women had laid out their daughters in front of him like cards at a table. He had nodded politely and walked past every single one of them. The town had a theory about Silas Holloway. The theory was that he was waiting for a particular kind of woman. A delicate kind. A soft kind. The kind that matched the size of his fortune. The town was about to find out it had been wrong about that, the same way it had been wrong about a great many other things. It was a Tuesday in May. The day was hot already by 8. Hannah Mae Carter walked into town with a basket of eggs on her hip and butter wrapped in cloth in her other hand. The boardwalk was full. Word had gone out that the Diamond H wagon was due before noon, and every unmarried woman in 3 settlements was wearing her good dress. Hannah was wearing her good dress too, not because she expected anything, because Tuesday was market day, and her good dress was the cleanest one she owned. And that was when Wesley Pike stepped out of his father's bank. Wesley Pike was wearing a new gray waistcoat. His hair was oiled. He had on the kind of boots a man wears when he wants women to notice his stride. He saw Hannah crossing the street and his face did the thing it always did. The corner of his mouth turned up. His eyes went flat. He stepped down from the boardwalk. He said good morning to her real loud so everyone could hear. He said it the way a man says hello to a stray dog he's about to throw a rock at. Hannah did not answer. She kept walking. Wesley fell in beside her. He matched her pace. He started in. He said the town must be getting bigger lately because he could see Hannah Mae Carter coming a full mile out. He said Mrs. Tilden the dressmaker was going to need to order extra bolts this winter. He said maybe Hannah ought to start coming to market on horseback because walking was costing the town its boardwalk planks. 2 men on the boardwalk laughed. A woman tittered behind a fan. Hannah kept walking. Wesley got the look on his face he got when he was not getting the reaction he wanted. He stepped in front of her. He stopped her cold. The basket of eggs swung against her hip and steadied. He looked her up and down. He said the words slow, so every soul on that boardwalk could hear them. He said she was the largest unmarried woman in 3 counties. He said it was a wonder her father didn't put her in the barn with the rest of the livestock. He said no man living was going to take her to the altar, and she ought to start considering whether she might do better as a hired hand somewhere out of town where folks didn't have to look at her. Then he kicked the basket out of her arms. That was the first sound. The basket hitting the dirt. The eggs cracking. The yolk on her hem. Hannah did not move. She did not look up. She just stood there with the smell of broken eggs around her ankles and the laughs starting up behind her. The same laughs she had been hearing for 16 years. That was the moment the Diamond H wagon came around the corner. Came slow. 2 black horses. A man on the bench in a tan coat and a wide hat. Behind him, for ranch hands on horseback, all of them carrying the same kind of quiet that comes off a man who has worked outdoors his whole life. The wagon stopped in the middle of the street. Silas Holloway looked down at the broken basket. He looked at the yoke on Hannah's hem. He looked at Wesley Pike. He looked at the people on the boardwalk. He took off his hat. He stepped down from the wagon. He was tall. Taller than Wesley by a head. Lean, but the lean of a working man, not the lean of a boy in a waistcoat. He walked across the dirt to where Hannah was standing. His boots were dusty. He knelt down. He picked up the basket. He set it upright. He picked up the 2 eggs that had survived. He set them in the basket. He stood up. He turned to Wesley Pike. He did not say anything to Wesley. He did not look at Wesley like a man looks at another man. He looked at Wesley the way a rancher looks at a dog that has been worrying his sheep. He looked at him just long enough to know him, and then he turned his back. He turned to Hannah. He held out the basket. He said 3 words. He said, "She's the one." He did not say it loud. He did not need to. The street was already silent. Every soul on that boardwalk heard those 3 words like they had been spoken straight into their own ear. She's the one. Hannah did not understand. Hannah looked at him like he had spoken a foreign tongue. Hannah's hand came up halfway to take the basket and then stopped, because her brain had not yet caught up with what her ears had just received. Wesley laughed. It was a short, ugly laugh. He said the rancher must be joking. He said the rancher must not have gotten a good look. He said maybe Mr. Holloway had been out on the range too long and his eyes were going. Silas Holloway turned his head. Just his head. He looked at Wesley Pike one more time. He said, plain and flat, "I got a good look." Then he turned back to Hannah and waited. Hannah took the basket. The street stayed silent. Nobody breathed. Nobody knew what to do with what had just happened in front of them, because what had just happened was not in the script the town had been reading from for 30 years. Silas put his hat back on. He told Hannah he would walk her home. He did not ask. He said it the way a man states a fact. He picked up her butter. He carried it for her. He walked beside her down the street, slow, matching her pace, his 4 ranch hands following at a distance on horseback. They walked past Wesley Pike, who stood with his mouth half open and one boot still in the dirt where he had kicked the basket. They walked past Mrs. Tilden, who had stopped tittering. They walked past the open door of the bank, where Wesley's father Albert Pike was standing on the threshold with a strange new expression on his face. They walked all the way to the edge of town and down the wagon road and across the little wooden bridge to the Carter farm. At the gate, Silas Holloway handed Hannah her butter. He took off his hat again. He told her he would call on her on Saturday, if she was willing. He said he understood she had no reason to believe him, and he did not expect her to. He said she could think on it. Then he climbed back into his wagon and rode away. Hannah stood at her own gate for a long time. Then she went inside. She set the basket on the table. She set the butter beside it. She washed her hands in the basin. She sat down at her sewing chair by the window. She picked up the shirt she had been mending for her father. She put the needle through the cloth. The room was very quiet. The clock on the mantel ticked. A bird sang in the apple tree outside. She told herself it had not happened. She told herself it was a misunderstanding. She told herself a man like Silas Holloway did not say those words about a woman like her, and if he had not meant them, and Saturday would come and he would not, and that would be the end of it. She finished mending the shirt. She folded it. She set it on the chair beside her, and she breathed out, and the day went back to being a day. She did not finish her tea. She was halfway through her second cup when she heard the hoofbeats. Not one horse. 3. 3 horses coming up the wagon road at a pace that wasn't a visit. She set her cup down. The hoofbeats stopped at her gate. Boots came up her path. There was no knock. The door opened on its own. 3 men stood in her doorway. 2 of them she did not know. The third was Albert Pike, the banker, Wesley's father. He took off his hat. He smiled the smile he used at the bank when he was about to take a man's land. He said he had brought a small matter to her attention. He said he hated to disturb her at home, but the bank had reviewed her father's note, and the bank had concerns. He said the note had a clause about the value of the collateral. He said the bank had reassessed the value of the Carter farm and found it wanting. He said the note was now considered under-collateralized. He said the bank was calling the balance. He said the balance was due in 30 days. He said that was $940. Hannah's father did not have $940. Hannah's father did not have 90. The whole farm did not turn that in 3 years of good seasons. Albert Pike knew this. He knew it the way a fisherman knows the weight of a fish on his line. He said he was sorry it had come to this. He said sometimes the bank had to make hard choices. He said if Hannah wanted to discuss alternatives, he was available at his office. Then he tipped his hat. He smiled again. He left. The 2 men stayed for a minute longer. They stood in the doorway. They looked around the room. They looked at her. They looked at her the way men look when they want a woman to know they have looked. Then they left too. Hannah stood with her hand on the table. This was no longer a kicked basket. This was no longer a word in the street. This was the bank, and the bank was the law, and the law could put her and her father off this land before the first frost. If you've made it this far and you want to see how a woman like Hannah May Carter handles a banker like Albert Pike, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Costs you nothing. It tells me to keep telling you stories like this one. Now let's get back to it. Hannah's father was in the back room when she went in. He was sitting in his chair by the window. His leg was up on the stool. He had heard everything. He did not look at her. He said it was his fault. He said he had signed that note when she was 18 because he had needed to put a new roof on the barn. He said he had not understood the clause. He said he had trusted Albert Pike because Albert Pike had been a deacon at the church when his wife was still alive. He said he was sorry. It was the first time in 12 years he had said anything to her that sounded like he saw her. Hannah did not cry. She did not have the time for crying. She put on her bonnet. She took the wagon. She drove the wagon 30 miles west. She got to the Diamond H by sundown. A ranch hand met her at the gate. He took one look at her face and he did not ask questions. He led her to the main house. He went inside. He came back out a minute later. He held the door open. Silas Holloway was in the kitchen. He was making coffee. He had his sleeves rolled up. He looked at her and he saw what was on her face and he said, "Plain, sit down." She sat down. She told him the whole thing. The basket, the boy, the bank, the note, the 30 days. He listened. He did not interrupt. He poured her a cup of coffee. He set it in front of her. When she was done, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said one word. He said, "No." Just that. No. He stood up. He walked to a drawer in the sideboard. He opened it. He took out a leather book. He set it on the table. He sat back down. He opened the book to a page that was already marked. He said the Diamond H banked with a house in Kansas City. He said that house had ties to 2 of the railroad lines. He said Albert Pike's little operation in town owed money to the Kansas City house, the way all small banks owed money to bigger ones. He said he would send a wire in the morning. He said by sundown tomorrow Albert Pike was going to receive a letter that explained, in very polite language, that the Kansas City house had reviewed Pike's lending practices, and that the Kansas City house had concerns, and that the Kansas City house was going to be looking very closely at the loans Pike had written over the last 10 years. He said Albert Pike would be too busy explaining himself to call in any more notes for a while. He said the Carter note would be paid by the Diamond H in full by Friday. Hannah said she could not let him do that. Silas Holloway looked at her across the table. He said, "I already told you on Tuesday. You're the one." That was not a small thing I said. I said it because I meant it. And I'm not going to watch you lose your father's farm because a coward in a waistcoat couldn't take being told no. He said it without raising his voice. He said it the way a man states the weather. And Hannah Mae Carter, for the first time in 12 years, looked at a person and let herself believe what they had just said to her. She rode home in the dark. She did not sleep that night. She sat at her father's table with a single lamp burning, and she did not sleep, because the world had moved and she did not yet know how to stand in it. By morning, she knew. Saturday came. Silas Holloway came up the wagon road in his Sunday coat. He had a wagon behind him, and in the wagon was a chest, and in the chest was the deed to the Carter farm, paid in full, and a receipt from the Kansas City house showing the Albert Pike note marked as discharged. He laid it on the table in front of her father. Her father read it 3 times. Then he put his hand over his face and he wept. Silas waited. When her father was done, Silas said he had come to ask Hannah a question, and he would like to ask it with her father's permission. Her father nodded without looking up. Silas turned to Hannah. He said he had not been raised in this country. He said he had come west at 19 with 2 horses and a saddlebag and a wife who had died on the trail with their child still inside her. He said he had buried them both on a hill in Wyoming. He said for the next 10 years, he had not let himself notice another living woman, because the part of him that did the noticing had been buried with them. He said he had not noticed Hannah Mae Carter for the last 6 years because his eyes had not been working. He said his eyes had started working again on Tuesday morning, when he had ridden into town and seen a woman standing in the middle of a dirt street with broken eggs at her feet and her chin still up. He said he had known 3 things by the time he stepped down off that wagon. He said the first thing was that she was strong. He said the second thing was that she was not afraid. He said the third thing was that she had been waiting, the way he had been waiting, for someone to walk into the street and see her standing there. He said he was that someone and he was tired of waiting, and he wanted to know if she was too. He asked her to marry him. Hannah looked at him for a long time. Then she said yes. She said yes the way her father said amen in church. Quiet. Final. With both hands flat on the table. Word got to town before noon. By 2 in the afternoon, the boardwalk was full again. Word travels fast in a place where there is not much else to talk about. By 3, Wesley Pike had ridden out to the Carter farm with 4 of his friends. He had been drinking. He had a pistol on his hip. He stopped at the gate. He yelled for Hannah to come out. Silas was still there. He had not left. He came out onto the porch. He stood there with his hands at his sides. He did not have a gun. Wesley got off his horse. He came up the path. He started in on Hannah. He yelled that she had bewitched the rancher. He yelled that she was a fortune hunter. He yelled that no woman who looked the way she looked got that ranch unless something was wrong. He yelled all the things he had been yelling for 16 years, only now he was yelling them louder because his father was about to lose the bank and his world was about to end and he knew it. Silas let him yell. When Wesley was done yelling, Silas said one thing. He said, "Hannah, you got anything you'd like to say to this boy?" Hannah came out onto the porch. She had her hands at her sides. She was wearing the same dress from Tuesday. The yoke stain was still on the hem. She looked at Wesley Pike. She said his name. Just that. Wesley. She said he had called her a heifer when she was 12, and she had hit him and he had cried, and he had been making her pay for that cry every single day for 16 years. She said she was done paying. She said she had not bewitched any man. She said she had not asked any man for anything. She said a man had ridden into town on Tuesday and seen what was actually in front of him, and that was the difference between a man and a Wesley Pike. She said she felt sorry for him. She said it without venom. She said it the way a woman says a true thing. She said his father was going to lose the bank. She said the town was going to remember who had stood in the street on Tuesday and who had thrown the eggs. She said in 10 years there would be Holloways running this county, and there would be no Pikes left in it. She said she was going to be one of those Holloways. She said now he could get back on his horse, or he could draw the pistol on his hip and find out what 4 Diamond H Ranch hands did to a drunk boy who shot at an unarmed man on his own porch. She pointed. Wesley had not noticed the 4 ranch hands. They had come up the side of the house quiet, the way ranch hands do. They had rifles. They were not pointing them. They did not need to be pointing them. Wesley Pike turned the color of milk. He got back on his horse. He rode away. His 4 friends rode after him. They did not look back. The porch went quiet. Silas Holloway looked at Hannah. He said, "I told you. You're the one." Hannah said, "I believe you now." They were married 3 weeks later in the little white church at the edge of town. Hannah's father walked her down the aisle. He used a cane and he was slow, and he did not say anything the whole way, but when he handed her to Silas Holloway at the front of the church, he leaned in close to her ear and he said one thing. He said her mother would have been proud. He said he was sorry it had taken him this long to say so. Hannah did not cry then either. She had decided she was done with crying for things that were already finished. She kissed her father on the cheek. She turned to Silas. She took his hand. The church was full. That was the part that mattered in its small way. The church was full. Every soul in town had come. Some of them had come because they were curious. Some of them had come because they were ashamed. Some of them had come because the Diamond H was now the biggest single account in the new bank that had opened in Albert Pike's old building, and they understood that the world had shifted, and they wanted to be on the side of it that was still standing in a year. Mrs. Tilden was there in her best bonnet. She was the one who had tittered behind her fan on Tuesday. She brought a casserole. She did not look Hannah in the eye. Hannah did not look at her either. She did not need to. There would be time for Mrs. Tilden later. There would be time for all of them. Albert Pike was not there. Albert Pike was in Kansas City answering questions about his lending practices. He would not be coming back to town. The bank he had run for 30 years had been bought out by a syndicate Silas Holloway happened to have a substantial interest in. The new manager was a quiet man from St. Louis who paid his accounts on time and did not call notes on widows. Wesley Pike was not there either. Wesley Pike had gone west to look for work on a railroad crew. He had heard that out past the territories nobody asked too many questions about who your father was. He was not wrong about that. But he was also not the kind of man who lasted long on a railroad crew, and that is a story for another night. The wedding was simple. The minister spoke for 15 minutes. Silas said his vows in a voice that carried to the back of the church. Hannah said hers in a voice that was hers, the voice she had not used in 12 years, the voice that had been waiting in her chest the whole time. She said she would take this man as her husband, and she would keep him, and she would walk beside him for whatever time the Lord gave them. Silas kissed her at the altar. The town clapped. Some of them clapped because they were happy. Some of them clapped because everyone else was clapping. It did not matter which. The sound was the same. They walked out of the church into the sunlight together. There was a wagon waiting in the street. The same wagon Silas had ridden into town in on Tuesday. The same 2 black horses. The same dust on the wheels. Silas helped her up onto the bench. Before he climbed up beside her, he reached into the back of the wagon and he took out a basket. It was a new basket. It was full of eggs. The eggs were brown and clean and not one of them was cracked. He handed it to her. He said, "I owed you these." Hannah looked at the basket in her lap. She looked down the street, at the patch of dirt where the old basket had been kicked out of her arms 3 weeks before. The yoke stain had long since been ground out by wagon wheels and boot heels. There was nothing left of it to see, but she knew where it had been. She would always know where it had been. She looked at Silas. She said, "You didn't owe me anything. You gave me something." He climbed up beside her. He took the reins. He clicked his tongue at the horses. The wagon started forward. They rode down the main street of town slow, the way Silas always did things. The townspeople were still spilling out of the church behind them. Children ran alongside the wagon for a little ways and then dropped off. A dog barked from a porch. They passed the bank. They passed the dressmakers. They passed the spot where Wesley Pike had stood with his oiled hair and his new waistcoat and his small, ugly mouth. Hannah did not turn her head to look at it. She had spent 16 years looking down at that town. She was done with that now. She looked straight ahead at the road, at the open country past the bridge, at the long stretch of fence line that marked the start of the Diamond H. She looked at the place where she was about to start being a different kind of woman than the kind the town had told her she was. She had not become a different woman. That was the thing the town would take a while to understand. She had been this woman the whole time. The town had simply been refusing to see her. A man had ridden into the street one Tuesday morning and seen her. That was all it had taken. She set the basket of eggs on the seat between them. She put her hand over Silas Holloway's hand on the reins. She felt his thumb close over her fingers. They rode home.